Take a listen to the message from the Prime Minister, which he posted on his Twitter account in the last few minutes.
Hi, folks. I want to bring you up to speed with something that's happening today, which is that I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus. That's to say, a temperature and a persistent cough. And on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, I've taken a test that has come out positive. So I am working from home, I'm self-isolating, and that's entirely the right thing to do. But be in no doubt that I can continue, thanks to the wizardry of modern technology, to communicate with all my top team to lead the national fight back against coronavirus. And I want to thank everybody who's involved. I want to thank, of course, above all, our amazing NHS staff. It was very moving last night to join in that national clap for the NHS. But it's not just the NHS, it's our police, our social care workers, teachers, everybody who works in schools, the DWP staff, an amazing national effort by the public services, but also by every member of the British public who's volunteering. Incredible response. 600,000 people have volunteered to take part in a great national effort to protect people from the consequences of coronavirus. I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody who's working to keep our country going through this epidemic. And we will get through it. And the way we're going to get through it is, of course, by applying the measures that you'll have heard so much about. And the more effectively we all comply with those measures, the faster our country will come through this epidemic and the faster we'll bounce back. So thank you to everybody who's doing what I'm doing, working from home to stop the spread of the virus from household to household. That's the way we're going to win. We're going to beat it, and we're going to beat it together. Stay at home, protect the NHS, and save lives.
So the Prime Minister giving the news there of his own positive test for coronavirus, saying that he developed a temperature and a cough, mild symptoms, and on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, he took a test and it has come back positive. But typically confident and positive, expressing his thanks to NHS staff, expressing his thanks and to the country and his confidence that the country would overcome the virus. Let's talk now to James Forsyth, who is a Spectator columnist. James Forsyth, thanks so much for joining us. You will have seen and heard that video of the Prime Minister. Your immediate reaction?
I think, as you said, it's going to classically Boris Johnson, very positive. But obviously, he is still going to lead the government's response. But I think there'll be a lot of concern in Whitehall because obviously he has been in contact with many of the key figures for dealing with this crisis in the past few days. And so it undoubtedly does complicate things on a governmental level.
And he obviously, you said he was positive there. I mean, he said his symptoms were mild. And coming just talking for a moment longer about the Prime Minister himself and his health, he does look in that video well and he does sound well. So I suppose while the concerns that you express about the wider infections that might be going on, in terms of his own personal health, he looks in good shape.
Yeah, and I think it's important if the public health advice is that anyone with a temperature and a cough must self-isolate for 14 days, then the Prime Minister himself has obviously got to follow that. He can't carry on going to work when he's telling everybody else not to. But I think a lot of stuff in Whitehall is already happening remotely. You're having cabinet meetings happening on Zoom, something I don't think any of us thought would have happened before this crisis hit. So I think there are ways to deal with that. I think the concern will be, and this has been the concern for quite some time now, is what happens if this infection spreads throughout Whitehall? How much more difficult does that make the government's job?
Well, let's talk then about that in more detail, because until very recently, the Prime Minister has been conducting those news conferences with a large number of journalists in the room. Of course, Pete, some of our audience may not feel that journalists are critical workers, but then obviously his aides inside Downing Street, the chief medical officer, the chief scientific advisor. There are a lot of key people in the battle who he has been working within very close proximity to, as we've all seen over recent days.
Yeah, I think the question becomes, I think they, as far as possible, have tried to follow the social distancing guidelines. If you look again at that cabinet meeting on Tuesday, yes, the Health Secretary Matt Hancock was physically present in the room, but I think he's a good 6 feet away from the Prime Minister. Yes, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were both standing outside Number 10 last night, clapping the NHS staff, but again, I think they were the appropriate 6 feet away from each other. So I think I think the question becomes, how widespread is this infection in Whitehall? I think there already have been some Number 10 staff self-isolating because they had symptoms, and I think there will be worries about whether this could just make things even more difficult as the government tries to handle what is undoubtedly one of the biggest peacetime challenges this country has faced.
And if the Prime Minister becomes unable to lead the effort due to any worsening of symptoms, then the duties fall upon Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary. It is, as we understand from earlier this week, his role to step up should he be needed.
Yeah, he is the first Secretary of State as well as being Foreign Secretary, and that means that if the Prime Minister is incapacitated for any time, he essentially acts as the acting Prime Minister.
And, Dominic Raab himself, this would be a huge accretion of duties to him.
Yeah, obviously it would be. And ironically, he himself has already been tested for coronavirus and tested negative. I think it would obviously make things more difficult for government, especially because Boris Johnson has very much been the face of the government's response to coronavirus. He's been holding these regular press conferences. It's been his tone, his addresses to the nation that have been at the heart of the government's effort to communicate with the public. So and Dominic Raab is nowhere near as well known a figure as Boris Johnson.